The most dangerous man in the room is not the loudest one, not the strongest, not the richest. It's the man who needs nothing. He doesn't need approval. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't need attention. And because of that, he becomes untouchable. Most men don't understand this. They think power comes from having more. More status, more money, more recognition. And they spend their lives chasing it, believing that one day it will make them respected. But the truth works in the opposite direction. The more you need, the less power you have. Because need creates dependency, and dependency is visible. You can hear it in the way a man speaks. You can see it in how quickly he reacts. You can feel it in how he adjusts himself around others. He needs people to agree with him, so he explains more. He needs to be liked, so he softens his edge. He needs to be accepted, so he avoids saying what he really thinks. And without realizing it, he gives control away, not all at once, but piece by piece, because every need is something that can be used against you. If you need approval, people can withhold it. If you need attention, people can ignore you. If you need validation, people can control how you feel. And once that dynamic is in place, you are no longer operating freely. You are reacting. That's why most men feel like they're always trying to prove something. Because they are. They're trying to prove they're worthy of attention, worthy of respect, worthy of being heard. But the moment you try to prove your value, you lower it. Now compare that to the man who needs nothing. He doesn't explain himself unnecessarily. He doesn't chase reactions. He doesn't adjust his behavior to fit the room. He stays the same, whether people agree or don't, whether people notice or don't, whether people approve or don't. And that creates something most men never develop: freedom. Because when nothing external controls your state, no one else controls you. And people feel that instantly. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. There's no pressure in him, no need to impress, no hidden agenda, just presence. And that presence is what makes him dangerous. Most men think they are in control, but look closer, and you'll see the opposite. Their behavior is constantly influenced by something outside of them. A message gets ignored, and their mood shifts. Someone disagrees, and they rush to defend themselves. They feel tension, and immediately try to fix it. That's not control. That's dependence. And it shows up in subtle ways most men never notice. A man checks his phone too often, because he's waiting for a response. He changes his tone depending on who he's speaking to. He laughs at things he doesn't find funny, just to stay accepted. None of this feels extreme, but it adds up. Because every time your state depends on something external, you give that thing power over you. And people can feel that, not logically, but instinctively. They sense when a man is grounded, and when he's influenced. That's why two men can say the same words and be received completely differently. One speaks, and it feels solid. The other speaks, and it feels like he's trying. The difference is not in what they say. It's in what they need. The man who needs nothing is not trying to get a reaction. He's not speaking to be liked. He's not acting to be accepted. He's not adjusting to avoid discomfort. He simply exists in his position. And that creates a kind of pressure most people aren't used to. Because when you're around someone who doesn't need anything from you, you can't control them. You can't manipulate their reactions. You can't predict their behavior. You can't influence their state. And that lack of control makes people pay attention. It shifts the dynamic. Most interactions are built on subtle exchanges: approval for behavior, attention for engagement, validation for compliance. But when a man removes himself from that exchange, the system breaks. He's no longer playing the same game. And when you're not playing the game, you can't be controlled by it. That's why he doesn't chase conversations. He doesn't try to win every interaction. He doesn't need to be understood by everyone in the room, because his position is not dependent on any of it. And this is where most men get it wrong. They think becoming dangerous means being aggressive, dominant, loud, intimidating. But real danger is quieter than that. It's the man who cannot be pulled, cannot be pressured, cannot be influenced by approval or rejection. Because once you remove those levers, there's nothing left to control. And that's when your presence starts to change. Not because you're doing more, but because you're no longer reacting to everything around you. At this point, most men hear this and misunderstand it. They think needing nothing means disconnecting from everything, becoming cold, distant, uninterested. But that's not power. That's avoidance. And people can feel that just as clearly. There's a difference between a man who doesn't need anything and a man who pretends he doesn't care. One is grounded, the other is hiding. And that difference changes everything. Because real detachment is not about shutting down. It's about removing dependence. You can still engage, still speak, still connect, but you're not doing it to get something back. That's the shift. Most men interact with an expectation. They say something, expecting a reaction. They give attention, expecting it in return. They show interest, expecting validation. And when they don't get it, their behavior changes. They become slightly more eager, slightly more reactive, slightly less controlled. That's where they lose their position. Not because they care, but because they need the outcome. Now look at the man who operates differently. He can give attention without needing it back. He can speak without needing agreement. He can walk away without needing closure. And because of that, he remains stable. No emotional spikes, no sudden shifts, no visible dependency. And that stability creates something rare, predictability in self, and unpredictability to others. People don't know how to read him, because he's not reacting in the usual ways. He's not chasing engagement. He's not filling silence. He's not adjusting to keep things comfortable. And that creates tension, but not the kind most men avoid. This is controlled tension, the kind that makes people lean in, the kind that makes people observe more closely, the kind that makes people wonder, what is he thinking? And that question alone creates depth. Because when people can't easily define you, they assign value to you. Now here's where it becomes real. This is not something you can fake. You can't pretend to need nothing while internally seeking everything. Your behavior will expose you, in your timing, in your tone, in your reactions. That's why this is not a technique. It's a standard. You either rely on external responses, or you don't. You either need validation, or you've removed that need. And once you remove it, your entire presence shifts. You stop performing. You stop managing how you're perceived. You stop chasing outcomes, and in that absence of need, you become harder to influence, harder to move, harder to control. And that's when people stop trying to figure out how to get something from you and start trying to understand you instead. At the highest level, this is no longer about behavior. It's about position. Because the man who needs nothing doesn't just act differently. He exists differently. He's not trying to win people over. He's not trying to maintain an image. He's not trying to control how he's perceived. And because of that, he becomes impossible to place. Most men are predictable. You can see what they want. You can feel what they're trying to get. You can sense how they'll react. And once someone is predictable, they're controllable. But the man who needs nothing breaks that pattern completely. You can't bait him with approval. You can't pressure him with rejection. You can't move him with attention or silence, because none of those things define his state. And when a man reaches that point, something shifts in how people treat him. They become more careful, more aware, more measured, not because he demanded it, but because his presence requires it. That's the part most men never understand. Respect is not something you ask for. It's something people adjust to, and people only adjust when they feel they can't influence you. Now here's where it becomes uncomfortable. When you stop needing things from people, some will pull away because they no longer feel in control of the interaction. They can't read you the same way. They can't predict your responses. They can't rely on your reactions, and that makes them uneasy. But that's the cost, because the moment you become easy to control, you become easy to overlook. Most men choose comfort. They choose to stay liked, to stay included, to stay understood. But those choices come with a trade-off. Less control, less weight, less presence. The man who needs nothing accepts the opposite. Less approval, less validation, less external feedback. But in return, he gains something most men never reach: stability. And from that stability comes authority. Not forced, not loud, not performed, just there, unshaken by reactions. Unaffected by outcomes, unmoved by what others think. And that's what makes him dangerous. Not because he dominates others, but because nothing external dominates him. And in a world where most men are constantly reacting, that kind of control stands out immediately. Because in the end, the man who needs everything can be controlled by anything, but the man who needs nothing can't be controlled at all.